When we study English literature, we need to take note of the social, historical, and cultural backgrounds or contexts of a text. Because sometimes it's directly related to our understanding of the text, and sometimes not so much so. Whatever the case may be, it always illuminates the text if we know more about the social, historical, and cultural backgrounds of a writer. Now, what can we consult? How can we go about looking for this information? We can perhaps look at biographies on the life of the writer. We can look at his other works. Do they share themes? Do they share settings, etc.? We can look at the historical period from which it comes. We can look at certain places and events that occur within the text or texts, more of his texts. We can look at the language used and how that relates to the social background and to the historical and the cultural background. So we are mainly going to look at the cultural and the social background of writers. And in today's lesson, we are going to focus on culture. And we are specifically going to look at one writer's work, Chinua Achebe. So, when identifying the cultural background of a writer, we must look at the country that we're talking about. In his case, it is Nigeria, at the community that he's from. So it's the Omuofia, not sure about the pronunciation. It's the tribe that he describes within his text. We look at race. In other words, is the person perhaps a Black Christian American? Is the person perhaps a Buddhist, Australian, from Asian descent? Can you see how many influences are there? We look at race, religion, country, community, all those things that have to do with culture. We need to look at those aspects. Because a writer draws from cultural experience in his writing very, very often. And we need to go and look for those aspects. And the cultural background of a writer very often gives the writer insights into both his own and similar cultures, because he also might write about similar cultures. Now, looking at Chinua Achebe, you will see that he was born in 1930. He died in 2013. He himself was raised in the Igbo town of Ogidi, southeastern Nigeria, and his cultural roots became the source of many of the themes and concerns in his writing. He was very, very opposed to the British culture, which was introduced in the late 19th century into Nigeria, and he felt that it was a real threat to the rich culture that the Nigerians had in the time that he grew up and lived. So the setting of his debut novel, Things Fall Apart, which was published in 1958, was then also set in southeastern Nigeria. In other words, where he grew up himself. So, what does he talk about in this book? What is this book about? And the novel actually chronicles pre-colonial life in Nigeria, life that he knew before the British came, and also the arrival of the Europeans and what it did to his culture. Two book covers. This very widely known and iconic book. You can see his concerns here in this extract, where he became terribly afraid of how the presence of the Europeans would debilitate the sort of the power and the essence of his people. And he really wanted to write about it, and he actually wanted to stop it. He was really against it. So listen to this extract. The white man is very clever. He came quietly and peaceably with his religion. We were amused at his foolishness and allowed him to stay. Now he has won our brothers, and our clan can no longer act like one. He has put a knife on the things that held us together, and we have fallen apart. So there are certain aspects that he touches upon, cultural aspects that he touches upon throughout the book. And the one aspect of their culture is that the art of conversation that the Nigerians had was totally different from the European conversation. The Europeans had a very direct way of saying it, but they really made conversation an art, and he's missing the fact that that is somehow affected or going to waste. He says, among the Igbo, the art of conversation is regarded very highly, and proverbs are the palm oil with which words are eaten. So it's very much part of their culture. He also looks at masculinity. Now, masculinity, being a real man, is a central theme in the book. A man was measured according to how many wives he had and how well he could provide for his family. And yam was a very profitable crop. And if you were a wealthy man, you had yam crops, right? So he says, yam, the king of crops, was a man's crop. No matter how prosperous a man was, if he was unable to rule his women and his children, and especially his women, he was not really a man. So manhood was very closely integrated with your women and your control and your power, which in turn was coupled with whether or not you can actually look after your family, how well you could provide for them. And this idea of male dominance and what it meant to be a man in Nigeria also, started to peter down because of the British involvement and the British influence. Another aspect that he explores in the novel is that of polygamy. And polygamy was not only accepted, it was expected of a man to have several wives. And if you had 9 wives, you were a rich man. So it was not something frowned upon. However, from the British or the Western point of view, it actually was frowned upon. And it made people start to think that perhaps this is wrong. And Chinua Achebe just didn't like the idea that the Western culture seeped in and started to kill their own culture, which he held very dear. So we see here in his novel, Things Fall Apart, iconic novel, how the practices and the values that were sanctioned by the Nigerian society became threatened. And he looks at their struggle to maintain the prevalence of the culture, these cultural aspects, once the colonists arrived. So we see influences in the novel from country, from community, from race, from religion, All of these things playing a part in this book. And what does Achebe do? He draws from his own cultural experiences and he incorporates aspects into his fiction while he has a certain message to give to the world about how he saw this invasion and how sad this invasion made him and how it actually ruined his precious culture. Bye for now.